In today's lesson, we're going to carry on looking at place profiles and looking at a place called Lympstone in Devon. This is part of the OCR A-level spec 1.A, where we need to contrast two place profiles at a local scale, looking at the different factors that shape that identity. In this video, I'm going to just look at natural characteristics, past characteristics, and the built environment. So we're going to look at the location of Lympstone. It's on the south coast. It's in the county of Devon, in East Devon specifically, and it's on the banks of the River Exe, and this is the estuary of the River Exe, and this is Lympstone. It's a kind of a small settlement, size of about 1,500 people, completely different to the other place we looked, Toxteth, very rural and much lower population density. So Lympstone and its natural location played a significant part in shaping its identity, especially in its early days. It's on tidal mudflats, as we said, on the River Exe estuary, but it was its situation on this estuary bank that made it an important port, similar to Toxteth in that respect, that kind of formed its early identity. So in the 13th century, it was a trading port that had connections with France, and so there was trading between Lympstone and in France across the Channel. By the 19th century, they had built up a relatively successful shipbuilding activity here, but that, as the ships got bigger, that started to decline after the kind of 19th century. And also during this time, it was an area where fishermen would leave Lympstone, go out into the estuary and fish shellfish there, particularly mussels, but they also go wider afield out into the North Atlantic and fish cod and do whaling. So the key link to the sea, because of its natural location by the sea, shaped Lympstone's kind of early identity. This also location near this lovely estuary was something that, when tourism started to become a thing in the UK in the mid-19th century, then the wealthy tourists would come to the beach at Lympstone, a tiny small beach, but they did that to be by the sea. It was kind of a popular tourist activity, as we can see in this right picture. That ended up shaping the kind of built environment, because obviously accommodation and facilities had to meet the need of these tourists. Here's examples, some cottages that were built around the kind of mid-19th century. And also, I'm going to show you the Swan Inn pub, which is of a similar time. Here's the Swan Inn pub. That's still in existence now, but that would have kind of facilitated the needs of tourists. And we can also see other things here, like an old house called the Old Bank. That shows you that this was a place that had kind of services in it. But many of these old services now have been converted to accommodation as the identity and the importance of the places changed. So that Old Bank place is actually now accommodation. In looking in terms of past characteristics and built environment, we should also consider the fact is that you can see all these kind of 19th century homes, and there's quite a lot of listed buildings from the 19th century in Lympstone, and in the heart of the village there are kind of really strict planning rules. So the parish council try to preserve the built environment here and to make sure it looks like this and continues to look here. Different to Toxteth, where we see a lot of fundamental change over time and fewer listed buildings. In terms of other changes, again, this is looking at past characteristics. The railway came to Lympstone in 1861. This had some fundamental changes on the people there. The shellfish fishermen we talked about, they could sell their products to a wider market, because now those products could be put on a train and exported to places like Exeter and further afield. But also it meant that people from Lympstone could actually travel to Exeter more easily. These are both really good examples of a process we call time-space compression. It's where places don't actually get closer because the physical distance doesn't change, but because we can get there quicker, that distance between the places appears to be closer. So the relative distance of place becomes closer as the time travel is reduced. We kind of had the same idea thinking about Australia hundreds of years ago would have felt like a really distant place because it would have taken 3 or 4 months to get there on a boat, but now we can travel there in 24 hours. So it feels closer due to this process called time-space compression. The railway hasn't just died out, it's still important. Now look at the 20th century and onwards, now to present day, it's still an important area for commuting. So people live in Lympstone and commute elsewhere, and that does actually shape the built environment. We looked at that heart of the village where there's old 19th century listed buildings, but here this is also part of Lympstone. We can see you've got detached and semi-detached housing. It's like a suburb on the edge of the village. This is very much because the function of Lympstone is now a dormitory settlement, which is a term that basically means that people sleep in Lympstone but commute to work somewhere else. So we can see that the changes in the function and the economic activity of Lympstone affect its built environment. When there was need for tourism there, they built cottages and they built facilities, but now it's a need for mainly accommodation for commuters. They're building these kind of nice modern detached and semi-detached houses.